Well, thanks for clicking on to the Friday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. Looks as if we could see a big flip around in the 2 meter temperature anomaly for Europe between the very warm February that was seen versus the March that we are now underway. Now, of course, these were the 2 meter temperature anomalies for Europe during February. It was one of the warmest Februaries on record for not just the UK and Ireland, but also across the continent, and it's interesting to see what is taking place, particularly so with the Amman Julian oscillation now starting to change the upper air pattern. But also we could see a very dramatic difference in the polar stratosphere. We had a very strong polar vortex during the course of February, driving all the warmth and storminess from west to east across the continent. But during the course of March, looks as if we are starting to see the slowdown in the zonal mean wind speeds across the Arctic region, and there is a stratospheric warming taking place at the moment. So much so that it looks as if that may play a big role in the latter stages of March, and I think particularly so in April in terms of a cooler than normal weather pattern. So we are reversing, we are seeing the pattern changing, and the month of March is definitely looking somewhat colder. This is the GFS Ensemble upcoming 5 day period. Cold Europe overall, apart from parts of Scandinavia, as you can see here. The 6 to 10 day still cold compared to normal widely across Europe. This is in stark contrast, of course, to such a warm February, and even the 11 to 15 day is showing below normal. Now, we are seeing slight warming across the continent, but still most of the UK below normal. This is the period between the 14th and the 19th of March. So it looks as if we are going to see a colder March, I think, overall. Now, looking at the 10 HPA temperatures, of course, this is at the upper levels of the stratosphere. Ongoing warming at the moment. We still have a strong enough polar vortex, by the way, but it's all just kind of shifted over towards the Eurasia side of the pole. But as I play through the loop, you can see what's taking place here. We continue to see this tug of war between warm and cold within the stratosphere. There is strong warming taking place right across the top of the pole, down into the northern portion of the Atlantic, and the polar vortex is really doing its best to try and fight off this warming. But I do think we are going to see a downward propagation of energy in from the stratosphere into the troposphere, and I think we could see some very look at the very strong burst of warmth right at the very end of that loop here. This, folks, I think is all pushing towards the type of pattern that we're going to see during the heart of the spring this year, and I don't think we're going to see any strong warming early on. That's for sure, given what I'm seeing now. This is let's have a look at the 70 HPA temperature profile, because this is more important in a sense. It's all very well seeing warming within the 10 millibar level, but it's really what goes on further down through the atmosphere that counts, because you can see strong warming away up within the stratosphere, but if you don't get that downward transfer into the troposphere, the weather is not going to really alter that much, really. And that's trying to put it in fairly simplistic terms. I know there is people here that are genuinely interested in weather, but they're struggling with the terminology. I do understand that, and I do try my best to keep it as straightforward as possible. For it is, even I struggle with the kind of the terms and the kind of language that a lot of some of the experts come away with. Even I'm struggling to understand that, and I've been studying weather for the best part of 30 years now. But you can see here, this is at 70 HPA, so this is a lower level within the stratosphere, extending into the troposphere, and you can see the warming taking place a wee bit, currently. And then as we press through to 120 hours at 70 HPA, now you can see the warming taking place, pushing towards Hudson Bay, the Baffin Straits. And if we can see that warming trying to push more towards Greenland, that would tell me that we could be looking for a negative North Atlantic oscillation towards the end of March and through much of April here. So it's all eyes on what's going on within the stratosphere. Also, all eyes on what is going on through the course of this weekend, and particularly in the next week. The modelling is pretty much honing in on high pressure from the continent, the core of that high over Scandinavia, dominating the weather pattern. And essentially, at the moment, some of these runs are kind of keeping the Atlantic at bay. Weather systems, low pressure, trying to push into the UK, coming up against that big block of high pressure over Scandinavia. But what essentially it's doing is, and this is kind of key to it, is it's dragging very cold air over Eastern Europe underneath that area of high pressure westwards, and eventually it looks as if at least there may be a kind of a section of that cold pool that does make it into the British Isles. Even if we keep the core of coldest air well over the continent, it's still going to be colder than normal. We are still going to see easterly winds. We're still going to see much colder weather than what we've seen really all winter long. So as I play through the loop, you can see this is, of course, the latest GFS run. Area of low pressure gets deflected southeastward, so there's no real change in yesterday's run versus the current run. You can see high pressure building in over the top of the British Isles through the course of the weekend into next week. And then, of course, that area of high pressure then starts to hook up with another area of low pressure up over Scandinavia. And this is when the wheels become kind of come into motion here. We'll see that area of high pressure strengthen significantly. Then you follow the isobars, they're starting to join up. And then we'll start to see the air flowing underneath, undercutting that area of high pressure and transporting colder air across the continent here, east to west here. And of course, that is essentially a reversal in the wind field here. So we've seen so much domination of west to east. Now we're starting to see east to westwards here. And it's essentially holding back the Atlantic here. So it looks as if it gets very interesting. Area of high pressure, two centres, one over the Baltic Sea, another one well up into Russia. And that you follow the isobars and it has a connection from Russia all the way towards the British Isles here. And that is very interesting indeed here. Certainly that would be a very cool look and a chart that we haven't seen in quite some time here. Finally, 850 millibar temperatures, plenty of cold air, if you notice here, both over the Atlantic, both over Europe. And you can see here as we go through the course of the weekend, slightly modestly colder over the UK. Notice here that we have got some colder air coming in underneath that area of high pressure from the continent across the southern portion of Britain. And then, of course, we've got increasingly cold air starting to show its hand the way up into the northeast of Europe here. And as I play through this loop, you can see that cold air starting to sink southwards, then westwards. And, of course, that area of high pressure, as it centres over Scandinavia, we'll see it starting to kind of pull westwards underneath towards the UK here. And this is, of course, by next weekend. Long way out, still alterations likely within the model. But you get the overall idea. Looks as if after a very warm February, we're starting to see the colder March starting to take hold here. So we'll keep an eye on this as we go forward here. Very interesting weather pattern coming up. Keep it right here on YouTube, on markvoganweather.com. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I'll be back again, hopefully with more tomorrow. Bye for now.